Welcome back to our channel, everyone. Today, we've got a truly extraordinary tale that's going to grip you right from the start. Imagine this: an alien woman with vibrant red skin, brutally tortured for entertainment, until one human steps up and willingly takes every blow meant for her. But here's the twist: her pain becomes his in ways neither could predict, setting off an intense journey filled with sacrifice, strange powers, and an unlikely bond that could change the fate of entire worlds. You'll want to stick around till the very end, because the final moments where Kiel and Zathari confront their pursuers and test the limits of her mysterious abilities will absolutely blow your mind. If you love epic stories like this, remember to hit that subscribe button to support the channel and keep these amazing adventures coming. Don't forget to leave a comment below, letting us know where you're tuning in from and your thoughts on Kiel and Zathari's powerful connection. Now, buckle up and let's dive into this incredible journey together. He smelled the blood before he saw her. It was a sickly, coppery tang suspended in the stale air of Valtra Station's lower decks, one of those places where every second corridor was lit only by a single flickering bulb. And then he heard her screams. They were raw, ragged, and edged with the kind of desperation you only heard when someone truly believed death was imminent. Kiel Deshawn, a retired coalition soldier turned freelance salvager, instinctively broke into a run. Most folks on Valtris Station would have ignored it. Minding your own business was the only rule that kept you breathing here. But Kiel had a habit of being the exception, and it was about to cost him more than he could possibly imagine. He skidded around a bend and nearly crashed into a group of jeering onlookers dressed in mismatched armor. They were gathered in a loose circle, the center of their attention a battered, red-skinned woman. She wasn't human. Her crimson complexion, tall frame, and luminous black eyes gave her away as something more exotic. She knelt on the oily floor, trembling from pain or fear, or both, her wrists shackled behind her back with heavy restraint cuffs. Her captors wore gleeful expressions. One of them lifted a stun rod and jammed it into the side of her neck, unleashing another wave of agony that tore a guttural scream from her raw throat. Kiel's gut twisted at the sight. He recognized organized cruelty when he saw it. During the Coalition Wars, he'd witnessed the worst of what sentient beings could do to each other. You never got used to it, but sometimes you learned to walk away. This time, he couldn't. Before he realized what he was doing, Keel stepped forward. "Leave her alone," he growled, his voice echoing in the narrow corridor. The group froze, turning to see who had the audacity to interrupt their sick form of entertainment. The ringleader, a scarred man with a patch over his left eye, blinked as if surprised. Then he smiled, revealing a mouthful of teeth filed to points. "Look, boys, a hero!" The scarred man pointed the stun rod at Kiel. "You want to take her place, stranger? I guarantee you'll scream just as pretty." Where are you all reading this from? Let me know. Comment 1 if you're enjoying it so far. Comment 2 if you have ideas for improvement. Kiel felt a surge of adrenaline, the same electric jolt that used to flood his veins when he was part of the Coalition's elite strike teams. But there was also something else bubbling beneath the surface: disgust. These bullies tortured the red-skinned woman simply because they could. He noted the flicker of the overhead light and the layout of the passage. If a fight broke out, there was little room to maneuver. Still, he knew close quarters had one advantage. It was easier to disarm an opponent up close if you got the drop on them. The scarred man snarled something unintelligible and lunged. Keel jerked aside, letting the blow glance harmlessly off his shoulder. His own fist connected with the man's jaw, producing a satisfying crack. Two more of the thugs waded in, brandishing shock batons that spat blue sparks with every swing. Keel's years of training kicked in. A sidestep here, a forearm block there, a quick pivot that sent one baton clattering to the floor. A knee strike into the second attacker's torso stole the man's breath and left him gasping. But in the swirl of fists and shouted threats, Kiel caught sight of the woman. She had shifted, no longer cowering on the ground but slowly standing, testing her restraints. As Keel subdued the last attacker with a calculated elbow strike to the base of the skull, the ringleader stumbled, spat blood, and raised his stun rod again. He took a single step toward the woman with malevolent intent. Keel reacted instantly, placing himself in front of her. Pain flared like molten metal across his back as the rod discharged. He clenched his teeth, refusing to scream. Through the haze of agony, he saw the woman's eyes widen. Her expression held an odd combination of fear and fascination. When the rod powered down, Keel's knees buckled. The ringleader sneered, readying another strike, but suddenly reeled backward, hands clawing at his head. He collapsed without warning. Keel blinked, stunned. The woman's lips were parted, and a faint, almost invisible wave of energy shimmered around her. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving the corridor in eerie silence. What do you think just happened? Comment 1 if you want more hints. Comment 2 if you have a theory. Breathing hard, Keel surveyed the motionless figure sprawled across the corridor. He took a slow, careful step, ensuring none of them would leap up again. Satisfied, he turned to face the red-skinned woman. Up close, he noticed tiny ridges along her jawline and a scattering of faint scars tracing a path down the side of her neck. She raised her shackled wrists in a silent plea. Keel knelt, fishing for a multi-tool in his vest pocket. "I'm going to get these off you," he said quietly. He pressed a button, sending a thin beam of heat across the metal cuffs. After a few tense seconds, the restraints popped open. The woman gasped, rotating her wrist gently as if testing their freedom. Then her gaze locked onto him, intense and probing. He offered her a hand, half expecting her to flinch. She didn't. Instead, she placed her palm against his, warm skin to warm skin, and let him guide her gently away from the unconscious thugs. The corridor smelled of ozone from the stun batons, mingling with sweat and fear. "Can you walk?" Keel asked. She gave a shaky nod. They had to move. Valtris Station was notorious for all manner of black market dealings, and a scuffle like this would draw unwanted attention. He tossed a quick glance toward the battered men. One of them moaned softly, stirring. They'd be awake soon and probably out for blood. "Let's go," Keel muttered. As they hurried through the winding corridors, the woman stumbled. Keel hooked an arm around her waist, supporting her. She was taller than him by a couple of inches, leanly muscled, and radiated an odd mixture of vulnerability and latent power. That sudden wave of energy that had dropped the ringleader still hovered in Keel's mind. He wanted to ask her how she did it, but she looked so haunted, so overwhelmed, that he held his tongue. They rounded a final corner and slipped through a maintenance hatch. This led to Keel's makeshift living space in one of the station's abandoned freight pods. It was cramped, but for the moment, it was safe. Need a breather? Comment 1 if you're still with me, or 2 if you think this is too intense. Inside the old freight pod, dim strips of overhead lighting flickered with a warm orange hue. The space smelled of welded metal and the faint chemical tang of sealant. Keel had done his best to renovate it into a functional dwelling. There was a cot pushed against the wall, an upturned crate he used as a makeshift table, and a scattering of tools across every available surface. It was hardly five-star accommodation, but compared to the corridor outside, it felt like a sanctuary. The woman lowered herself gingerly onto the edge of the cot. Her wrists were raw, and Keel could see faint marks where the stun rods had burned her. He rummaged through a dusty first aid kit, retrieving a small vial of antiseptic gel. "Hold still," he murmured, gently applying the cool salve to her wounds. She winced at first contact, but didn't pull away. When he finished, Keel grabbed a canteen of water and handed it to her. She tilted her head in silent gratitude, took a tentative sip, then drank more eagerly. Her throat must have been parched from hours, maybe days, of torment. Setting the canteen aside, she studied him with those dark, penetrating eyes. There was a question there, unspoken yet insistent. Finally, she parted her lips. Her voice, when it emerged, was husky and tremulous. Why? Kiel understood what she meant immediately. Why help a stranger? Why interfere? Why suffer a beating for someone whose name he didn't even know? He shrugged, suddenly feeling awkward. Because I don't like bullies, he said simply. And I was a soldier once. Didn't always get to choose who I hurt. Now I do. A flicker of something, recognition, sadness, passed across her features. She paused as though tasting the weight of her next words. My name is Zathari, she said at last. I owe you my life. Kiel shook his head. You don't owe me anything. I'm Kiel. He offered a half smile, hoping to lighten the grim mood, but Zathari's expression remained guarded. Slowly, she raised her hand, lightly touching the bandaged burn on his back where the stun rod had hit. A ripple of concern crossed her face, and for an instant, Kiel thought he felt something shimmer in the air between them. Quick check. Where are you reading from? And how's the pacing? Comment 1, if it's just right, 2, if it's too slow. Hours passed in tense quiet. Zathari curled on the narrow cot, drifting in and out of restless sleep. Kiel busied himself cleaning and reorganizing the scattered tools on his makeshift table, an excuse to keep his mind occupied. Outside, station announcements occasionally rumbled through the bulkheads, calling out docking schedules and security advisories. Kiel couldn't shake the memory of that moment when Zathari's captor had collapsed, clutching his skull. Had it been some hidden device, a neuroweapon, or something else entirely? He'd fought enough battles to know when an unseen force was at play. And yet, despite his curiosity, he hesitated to pry. She'd been through enough. When Zathari stirred, he noticed how she instinctively recoiled from the overhead lights. Her eyes flicked around the freight pod as if expecting more torment. Sighing, Kiel powered down one of the light strips to dim the environment. You're safe here, he murmured. Nobody comes around these old freight pods if they can help it. She nodded, though her posture remained tense, her shoulders stiff. I thank you. The words seemed to cost her. Perhaps it was pride, or fear, or both. Then she gestured to the battered metal walls. Is this your home? Temporary, Kiel admitted. I do salvage runs. Valtra Station is one of the few places that doesn't ask questions about where you came from or what your record might be. I'm off the radar here. He swallowed, feeling a sudden surge of guilt. But bringing you here might have put you in more danger. Those thugs, they might try to track you down. Zathari breathed out slowly. I am used to it. I have been property for a long time. The word property sent a chill through Kiel. He remembered the horrific auctions he'd heard rumors about. Sentient beings sold like livestock to the highest bidder, especially if they had valuable genetic traits. I escaped my last owner, she continued quietly. But there are always more like him. A weight settled in Kiel's chest. He saw the lines of old scars on her wrists that told their own tale. Without thinking, he reached out and gently squeezed her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Enjoying the depth? Comment 1, if you love the backstory. 2, if you'd prefer more action. Zathari's background unraveled in pieces over the next few days as she gradually recovered. She explained how her species, the Valkyr, were scattered across the galaxy after their homeworld fell under corporate-backed exploitations. Some Valkyr, like her, possessed rare genetic anomalies that made them targets of experimentation. Her particular anomaly? a phenomenon where any physical or emotional pain directed at her could, under certain circumstances, rebound onto someone who harbored protective instincts toward her. It was less a deliberate power and more a cruel twist of biology. The notion was both fascinating and horrifying. Kiel stared at the raw red skin around her wrists, remembering the wave of energy that had knocked that ringleader senseless. So every time someone tries to shield you from harm, they end up taking it instead? He asked quietly. She nodded. Only if they form an emotional bond or a protective impulse. It doesn't happen if they're simply passing by or if they feel nothing for me. But if their intention is to save me, the pain rebounds on them instead. My former captors used it for sport, pitting me against others who tried to help. They found twisted amusement in watching good people suffer because they dared to care. She swallowed, eyes dark with old traumas. And in a place like Valtris, that's exactly the kind of cruelty that draws a crowd. A grim silence settled over them. Keel thought about how he jumped in to rescue her without hesitation. The stun rod had cracked across his back, but then her captor had been the one who collapsed. Maybe Keel's implant, something he'd received during the coalition wars to regulate empathy and stress, didn't react the same way as a normal human mind. Or maybe Zathari's power wasn't fully engaged at that moment. Whatever the reason, he was still alive, and for that, he was grateful. So, he began, your biology is basically turning compassion into a weapon against the compassionate. Zathari averted her gaze. I never asked for it. I've been sold repeatedly, used like a demonstration piece for those who enjoy tormenting others with minimal risk. The bitterness in her voice was razor sharp. Keel felt a tug in his chest. He wanted to help, but every voice of self-preservation told him this was trouble beyond anything he'd ever seen. Pause here. Where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment and let's keep this adventure rolling. And the next morning, Keel left to scout the corridors and gather supplies. During his rounds, he overheard worried murmurs from traders. The station's newest entertainment had been disrupted, and no one quite knew how. Security patrols were doubling around the lower decks. Apparently, the men he'd beaten weren't just random thugs. They were part of a bigger syndicate known as Echelon Riptide, infamous for trafficking exotic and profitable life forms. And now they had a vendetta. Keel returned to his freight pod, arms laden with black market rations and a spool of synthetic bandage material. He found Zathari pacing restlessly in the narrow space. At first, he couldn't read her expression, but the tension in her posture spoke volumes. We need to move, she said without preamble. They know I'm here. They'll come for me soon. His stomach twisted. You're not well enough to travel yet, he began. She fixed him with a steely glare. I've been sick or injured for most of my life, Keel. I can manage. That shut him up. He nodded, setting down the supplies. She was right after all. Remaining on Valtris was a guaranteed death sentence, or worse. They needed a plan. Together, they rifled through his meager belongings. Keel had an old starship pass for a vessel he once tinkered on, hoping to fix it up for salvage runs. But the ship was in disrepair in one of the station's outer hangars. If they could manage to repair it enough for a single jump, they might escape Echelon Riptide's clutches. The ship's mostly operational, Keel explained, rummaging for a data slate containing schematics. But the ignition coil and the main thrusters need a patch job, and I'll have to bribe a docking official to let us launch, or else Echelon Riptide will keep us grounded. Zathari absorbed the information, her face determined. Tell me what to do. There was no fear in her voice, only resolve. Keel felt that tug in his chest again. He was about to risk everything, his meager savings, his home on this rusted station, his life, for a woman whose very biology was designed to punish those who cared. And yet, he couldn't walk away. Hit 1 if you're ready for them to fix up a ship. 2 if you want them to stand and fight. Working on the decrepit starship, named the tenacity in peeling white letters across its hull, proved more challenging than Kiel had anticipated. Many of the parts were obsolete, and the entire propulsion system needed a thorough rewire to handle modern jump lanes. Zathari pitched in wherever she could, learning basic engineering tasks on the fly. She was surprisingly adept once she got the hang of it, using her slender hands to reach into tight compartments where Keel's broader frame couldn't fit. At times, they worked in companionable silence. Other times, they exchanged cautious banter, both aware that Echelon Riptide might burst into the hangar at any moment. To keep them off the radar, Keel bribed a few key dock workers to maintain plausible deniability. Credits slipped from his pocket faster than he liked, and he sensed that time was running short. Rumors spread about an enormous bounty placed on a rare, high-value Valkyr. Zathari's capture could fetch a fortune on the black market, and the station's more desperate inhabitants wouldn't hesitate to turn them in. One afternoon, as they wrestled with the ship's ignition coil, Zathari paused, wiping sweat from her brow. What happens if someone tries to help me while we're cornered? Will they feel my pain? Keel remembered how that ringleader had gone down in the corridor. Maybe not. It only seems to happen when you're in imminent harm. But we don't fully understand your biology. She nodded, pressing her lips into a thin line. I just, I don't want good people getting hurt because of me. The sincerity in her voice caught Keel by surprise. He laid a hand lightly on her shoulder. We'll figure it out together, but first, let's get this bird off the ground. Night fell, though on Valtris Station, day and night were an artificial concept controlled by lighting cycles. By the time the station's overhead luminescence dimmed, they had managed to repair most of the thrusters. The ignition coil still gave them trouble, sputtering each time they ran a diagnostic. Yet they pressed on, fueled by necessity and a growing sense of trust between them. Meanwhile, Keel's nerves prickled every time a worker strolled too close, or a shadow moved outside the hangar's entrance. Are you hanging on every word? Comment 1 if yes, 2 if you're skipping ahead for the big showdown. Tensions finally erupted 2 days later when a squad of Echelon Riptide enforcers stormed the hangar. Keel was halfway under the Tenacity's hull, tightening a finicky valve, when he heard the heavy clang of boots on metal plating. He slid out to see 6 heavily armed thugs fanning across the space, guns raised. Their leader, a gaunt, pale man with a cybernetic eye, immediately spotted Zathari perched on the open cargo ramp, and his lips curled into a cruel smile. All this time, we thought you'd be cowering in the lower decks, he sneered. But here you are, planning a grand escape. Keel moved to stand beside Zathari, weaponless except for a small plasma cutter in his hand, hardly an ideal combat tool. We're leaving, Keel said evenly. No one needs to get hurt. A ripple of laughter ran through the squad. No one? The pale leader glanced pointedly at Zathari. You must not realize what she's worth. Big corporations, private buyers, and more. Everyone wants a living Valkyr with her. Special traits. Step aside, soldier boy. This doesn't concern you. It does now. Keel's voice was a quiet growl. He felt Zathari stiffen beside him. She was trembling, but not in fear, more like a caged animal forced into a corner, ready to unleash some hidden fury. The enforcers opened fire without warning. Keel lunged for cover behind a cargo crate, dragging Zathari with him. Bullets ricocheted off the starship's hull, sparks dancing in the gloom. Adrenaline surged in Keel's veins, bringing back memories of battlefields and ambushes he desperately tried to leave behind. He scrambled for something, anything, to fight back. The plasma cutter was limited, but if he got close, it could slice through steel. His heart thundered as he yelled over the gunfire, "Zathari, stay down!" Yet the moment he looked at her, he knew she wouldn't. She locked eyes with him, and something in her expression told him she refused to remain helpless ever again. Just then, one of the enforcers flanked the cargo crate and fired a barrage of plasma bolts. Kiel threw himself in front of Zathari. Pain exploded through his shoulder as a bolt grazed him, sending him sprawling. Is your heart pounding yet? Comment 1. If yes, 2 if no, we're just getting started. Zathari saw Keel hit the ground, clutching his bleeding shoulder. The color drained from his face, and she knew he was in agony. In that instant, all her life's trauma coalesced into a singular, ferocious drive. Protect him. She launched herself from behind the crate, an unarmed Valkyr against a half-dozen rifles. It was a move that made no logical sense, unless you considered her curse. One of the enforcers swung the butt of his gun at her head. Zathari braced for impact, but the blow never truly landed on her. Instead, it rebounded with a crack of invisible force, hurling the attacker backward. He slammed into a stack of metal crates, unconscious. Another tried to aim at her, but his weapon shook violently in his hands as if repelled by an unseen barrier. Confusion and panic blossomed among the squad. Meanwhile, Keel, gritting his teeth through the pain, forced himself upright. He had no idea what he was witnessing. Zathari's abilities had never manifested this strongly in the short time he'd known her. A swirling distortion of energy crackled around her body, tinted with a faint red glow that matched her skin. Echelon Riptide's men fired round after round, but each projectile veered off course, as though the bullet or plasma had decided it was too dangerous to hit her. Instead, some shots looped around and sliced through the metallic railings, leaving them partially melted, but the cost was visible on Zathari's face. She labored for breath, and her muscles spasmed under the strain. For every bullet deflected, a wave of pain rippled through her system, and it wasn't just hers to bear. Keel felt his own injured shoulder flare, the agony intensifying, nearly driving him to blackness. Their bond, it seemed, was transferring the toll of her power to him. She was saving him, and in doing so, forcing him to shoulder half of that dreadful burden. Roaring with defiance, the Pale Leader fired a sustained plasma beam from his cybernetic arm. It sliced across the hangar floor, molten metal dripping from the path. Zathari threw her hands out, bracing for a final stand. Curious where everyone is from? Post in the comments and let's unite over this cosmic battle. At that moment, a shrill alarm blared across the hangar. Automatic blast doors began slamming shut, triggered by the stray plasma beams that threatened the station's integrity. Kill seized the opportunity. "Zathari, get inside the ship," he shouted, clutching his wounded shoulder. The overhead lights flickered as emergency protocols kicked in. She staggered toward the tenacity, each step sending fresh jolts of pain through her that Keel could practically feel. Through their strange, involuntary link, every surge of her agony rattled his senses. His vision swam, but he forced himself to stay upright, using the cargo crate as leverage to stand. Echelon Riptide's squad scattered, some trying to override the closing doors, others still firing sporadically in desperation. Summoning what remained of his strength, Keel hurled himself at the nearest enforcer, tackling him to the ground. The man's rifle skittered away, and Keel pinned him with a forearm across the throat. "Stay down," he growled, panting for breath. Another attacker rushed in, but Zathari extended a shaking hand, and the man howled in sudden pain, dropping to his knees. Somehow, her biology had redirected his aggression back onto himself. "Now!" Keel yelled, waving frantically at Zathari. She sprinted up the ramp into the starship's interior. He followed, every step an ordeal as molten fire consumed his shoulder. Once inside, Zathari slammed the hatch shut. The hull reverberated with frantic pounding, then the piercing sound of bolts ricocheting off metal. As the station's lockdown completed, the hangar's main exit groaned, sealing Echelon Riptide's men on the other side. Keel slumped in the pilot's seat, ignoring the blood dripping from his wound. "Let's see if these repairs hold." he muttered through clenched teeth. Zathari, still trembling with exertion, dropped into the co-pilot's chair. She keyed the ignition. Nothing. Her heart sank. Then Kiel recalled a fail-safe they'd installed, a backup circuit to bypass the failing ignition coil. With shaking fingers, he flipped a concealed switch under the console. The tenacity sputtered to life, thrusters humming, ready for departure. Take a second to breathe. Comment 1 if you think they'll escape. 2 if you're not sure yet. The docking clamps that held the tenacity in place were locked under the station's emergency protocols, but Keel had foreseen that possibility. Days earlier, he'd bribed an old contact to slip him the override codes. Now, with sweat pouring down his face, he punched them in. A series of loud clanks echoed as the mechanical arms detached from the hull. Zathari's entire body trembled as she fought to stay conscious. The invisible field that had protected her moments ago seemed to have drained her physically and mentally. She glanced at Keel's shoulder, where dark rivulets stained his shirt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice tight with guilt. He forced a lopsided grin. "Don't be. Still alive, right?" Inside, though, he felt a swirl of confusion and concern. Their connection, whatever it was, had grown stronger under stress, and now he bore more than just a physical wound. Her own exhaustion coursed through him like a second pulse. A jolt rattled the ship as the station's clamp system tried to reattach. "We're out of time," Keel muttered. Carefully, he guided the tenacity off the deck. "Hang on." The battered craft lurched upward, scraping the ceiling before Keel righted it. He gunned the thrusters, making for the narrow exit shaft at the far end of the hangar. The station's alarm system shrieked in protest. Behind them, sparks and gunfire erupted anew. Some of Echelon Riptide's men must have found a way around the lockdown. Laser bolts scorched the tenacity's stern, but the hull plating held, albeit groaning ominously. Then, with a final roar of engines, they burst into open space. The emptiness yawned before them, studded with distant stars. Valtra's station shrank behind them, an ugly metal speck ringed by glowing docking bays. "We did it," Keel breathed, adrenaline still pounding in his veins. Zathari leaned back in her seat, eyes fluttering shut from sheer relief. They were free for now, but that freedom came with a price: a heavily damaged starship, a severe shoulder wound, and a dangerously misunderstood bond between them. Keel exhaled a shaky breath as he set a course for the nearest neutral zone. It was time to face the next fight. Next scene coming up. Comment 1 if you're on the edge of your seat. 2 if you want a quiet moment. Several hours later, Kiel managed to guide the tenacity into a hidden belt of cosmic debris, an old shipping route littered with the remains of ancient wrecks. He'd used this route before to elude patrolling frigates, and with the starship's stealth systems half functioning, it was their best chance at shaking off any trackers. Once they were nestled among drifting hull fragments, Kiel powered down to minimal life support. Zathari stood unsteadily and gestured for him to do the same. He protested, but she placed a firm hand on his uninjured shoulder. "You're losing blood. Let me help." Reluctantly, he rose from the pilot's seat and allowed her to guide him to the cramped medical bay, really just a corner of the ship with a half-functional auto suture and some bandages. She coaxed him onto a fold-out cot, then carefully peeled back his shirt to examine the wound. It was ugly, a scorched furrow where the plasma bolt had burned through muscle and skin. Zathari's face tightened with guilt. "If I hadn't—" "Stop," Keel said gently. "You saved me more times than I can count already." He swallowed a groan of pain. "Just patch me up." She worked methodically, cleaning the wound with antiseptic and using the auto-suture's shaky robotic arm to knit the edges. Keel gritted his teeth, beads of sweat forming on his brow. He could feel the tremors in her hands, her own fatigue still gnawing at her. Yet she persisted, a quiet determination in every movement. Eventually, the bleeding subsided and the wound was sealed enough for him to move without passing out. He eased himself upright and met her gaze. Thank you. Zathari lowered her head. I wish I could do more. Her voice was thick with emotion. My entire life, people have either exploited my curse or run from it. You're the first who's tried to. She stopped, blinking rapidly. Kiel placed a hand on her cheek. Her skin was warm, and for a moment, he felt that familiar tingle of energy, but less painful this time. It was as if their bond was adjusting, learning how to share their burdens without crippling them both. Who else feels the tension? Comment 1. If you sense a spark between them. 2. If you're all about the mission. Over the following days, the tenacity drifted through the debris field, evading prying eyes. Keel tested the ship's systems daily, hoping to coax enough power from the battered engine to make a faster-than-light jump. For now, they were stuck at sublight speed. Eventually, they'd need a safe port to repair the jump drive. But safe was a relative concept when Echelon Riptide could have an informant on any station in the sector. Between system checks and healing, they learned more about each other. Keel revealed how, during the Coalition Wars, he'd been chosen for an experimental empathic implant intended to reduce the psychological toll of combat. The device amplified certain emotional receptors, theoretically letting soldiers process distress more effectively. But in practice, it left many like Keel hypersensitive to the suffering around them, enough to defy orders that required cruelty. He'd been court-martialed after refusing to carry out a bombing run that would have killed civilians. That was how he ended up drifting from station to station, scavenging a living while trying to outrun his past. Zathari listened intently. That might explain why my curse reacted differently to you, she mused. Your implant might be bridging the gap between my pain and your empathy. We're linked in a way that's not purely biological or purely technological. It's a synergy. He chuckled grimly. Synergy that nearly got me shot to pieces. But yeah, synergy. There was no malice in his words, just a resigned acceptance. If it meant protecting her from Echelon Riptide, he'd take the risk. Sometimes, though, Kiel felt the strain. Waking from restless dreams, he'd find Zathari hunched over in the dim cockpit, shoulders shaking. When he touched her back gently, he'd feel her sorrow as though it were his own. Once, he caught glimpses of horrifying memories, labs full of needles and scalpels, men in white coats instructing guards to increase the voltage. He wanted to rip those images out of her head and destroy them, but all he could do was wrap his arms around her and say, "You're safe now," praying it was enough. Comment 1 to offer them comfort, 2 if you're ready for the next twist. Eventually, they decided to risk a jump to the frontier world of Axtora, known for its chaotic system of asteroid colonies and minimal Imperial presence. The plan was to barter or steal a jump drive stabilizer from one of Axtora's numerous black markets. With that installed, the tenacity could make the leap out of this sector entirely, hopefully escaping Echelon Riptide's sphere of influence. Keel coaxed the ship's battered systems into partial readiness. Zathari, by now, had become adept at rerouting power from non-essential modules, turning off lights and climate controls to funnel every spare watt into the engine. The living conditions were borderline miserable. Stale air, cold metal floors, and the constant hum of overtaxed circuits. But neither of them complained. They both understood the stakes. When the day came to attempt the jump, Keel strapped into the pilot's seat, while Zathari braced herself behind him. It might be rough, he warned, flicking switches that crackled in protest. If the coil overheats mid-jump, we could get stranded in hyperspace. Zathari's jaw tightened. Still better than the alternative. She closed her eyes, seemingly preparing for the stress on her body, and possibly preparing for her abilities to flare if something went wrong. Keel punched the throttle, and the starfield outside the cockpit windows elongated into streaks of light. A nauseating lurch seized his gut as the ship tore a hole through real space. Easy, he muttered under his breath, coaxing the battered engines. For a moment, it seemed to work. The tenacity soared through hyperspace in a trembling bubble of battered technology. Then alarms blared. The primary coil, starved for coolant, redlined in under a minute. Sparks erupted from a console behind Zathari. She wheeled around, slapping the emergency shutoff. "We're about to drop!" she shouted. Reality snapped back in a cascade of wrenching force. The ship careened out of hyperspace into the orbit of a smoldering red star. Kiel fought to keep control, but the engine sputtered, refusing to respond. Zathari slammed another switch, venting the overheated coil. Outside, the swirl of cosmic radiation battered the shields. They were free-falling into the star's gravity well. "Who's worried?" Comment 1. "If you think they'll pull through. 2 if you predict a fiery crash." Native panic surged in Keel's chest as he wrestled with the joystick. The tenacity trembled violently, warning klaxons howling. Heat readings soared on every sensor. They had seconds before the star's radiation overwhelmed the hull. "Zathari, reroute all power to forward thrusters," he barked. She darted to the console, punching in override codes. The ship's lights died, along with life support and artificial gravity, as every ounce of energy surged to the engines. With a desperate roar, Keel slammed the throttle. The tenacity bucked, metal groaning, but they could feel a shift, just enough thrust to break from the star's lethal pull. Slowly, painfully, the craft stabilized. Keel let out a ragged breath of relief, arms shaking from the strain. Zathari flopped back into her seat, drenched in sweat. "We can't survive another jump like that." Her voice was laced with exhaustion. Keel nodded, wiping a trickle of blood from his temple, the result of a minor collision with the console. "We'll have to limp to Axtora at sublight speeds," he said grimly. "Might take days, but it's our only choice." He glanced down at the readouts. "Shields are at 30%. The hull is scorched but intact. We're not dead yet." A shaky laugh escaped him, part hysteria, part relief. For the next few hours, they drifted. Zathari reactivated minimal life support, and gravity returned in jolts. The interior of the ship felt like a furnace, courtesy of their near brush with the star. They stripped off what gear they could, trying to cool down, guzzling water from the ration stores. Occasionally, Keel glanced at Zathari and noticed how her posture hinted at deeper pain. She'd pushed through it, refusing to let him see her weakness. But he felt it anyway through their bond, a dull ache in his own bones. When the temperature finally dipped enough to think straight, Keel charted a slow course toward Axtora. They'd arrive eventually, provided no other catastrophes intervened. As the flickering overhead lights cast shadows, he locked eyes with Zathari. "We're in this together," he said softly. She nodded, offering him a tired but genuine smile. "Reading from home, work, or elsewhere? Drop a comment and let us know you're still here." And Axtora came into view 2 days later, a sprawling system of asteroids bathed in pale starlight. The largest rock, known as Axtora Prime, was pockmarked with domed colonies connected by a spiderweb of pressurized tubes. Smugglers, pirates, mercenaries, anyone looking to dodge official scrutiny found haven here. It was the perfect place to disappear or get killed. Keel hoped for the former. They docked at a remote airlock, trading the last of their spare engine parts for berthing fees. Thick, stale air greeted them as they stepped onto the asteroid's surface inside a cramped dome. Low gravity made each step feel slightly buoyant. Zathari clutched a hood around her head, concealing her distinctive red skin. Her features might fetch an immediate bounty. The settlement resembled a giant metal labyrinth carved into the rock. Narrow corridors, neon signs flickering over rusted passageways, markets overflowing with contraband. Keel led the way, scanning the crowd for potential threats. He recognized the glint of hidden weapons in more than a few passers-by. A place like this demanded vigilance. They found a tech bazaar on the lower level where dozens of stalls displayed starship components, some obviously stolen. Zathari hovered close, studying each merchant's wares with a discerning eye. Eventually, they located a half-blind Zenthian tinkerer who claimed to have a jump drive stabilizer for sale. One-of-a-kind piece, he rasped through triple-lobed lips. Should handle your old junker for the right price. Keel's heart sank at the quoted figure. It exceeded their entire credit stash. He haggled, threatened, pleaded, but the Zenthian refused to budge. We'll have to find another way, Zathari muttered under her breath, stepping away from the stall. Her expression was pensive, as though weighing grim possibilities. Maybe we can borrow it. Steal it, you mean? Keel asked quietly. He'd done morally questionable things before, but theft from a place like Axtora could be a death sentence if caught. She nodded, her eyes grim. We don't have a choice. Echelon Riptide's bounty hunters could show up any moment. The longer we stay, the riskier it gets. Keel pinched the bridge of his nose. All right, he said reluctantly. We do it carefully, quietly, and if it goes south, we run like hell. One word, heist. Comment 1, if you're thrilled. 2, if you sense a trap. Yet the plan they concocted was simple in theory, but fraught with danger. Zathari would create a distraction in the tech bazaar. Nothing violent, just enough to draw the Zenthian tinkerer away from his precious stabilizer. Meanwhile, Kiel would slip behind the stall, snatch the part, and vanish into the labyrinthine corridors. Timing, secrecy, and luck were crucial. They returned to the bazaar at a busy hour. Vendors shouted over each other, hawking everything from black market vaccines to stolen star maps. Zathari lingered near the tinkerer's stall, her hooded figure blending into the throngs. With a subtle nod, she began her act, stumbling into the next booth, accidentally knocking over a display of fragile components. Glass shattered, tempers flared, and the tinkerer craned his neck at the commotion. Keel seized the moment. He slipped around the back of the stall, heart hammering against his ribs. A battered metal crate sat open, revealing half a dozen starship parts. He recognized the stabilizer from the tinkerer's description, a cylindrical device with neon blue filaments. He grabbed it, wrapping it in cloth to dampen any sensor pings, and tucked it under his jacket. Somewhere nearby, he heard raised voices, Zathari's and the tinkerer's outraged hiss. Watch where you're going, the Zenthian snarled. Even from this distance, Keel sensed Zathari's frustration morphing into real tension. He hurried, sliding away from the booth. The crowd swallowed him up, and he felt a rush of relief. Mission accomplished. But as he started weaving through the corridors, a prickle of dread nudged him. Something was off. Moments later, a commotion erupted from behind. Shouts of "thief" echoed, followed by the telltale crackle of a stun rod. Had they already discovered the theft? Keel's jaw tightened. Zathari must be in trouble. Against every instinct telling him to keep moving, he turned and pushed back toward the bazaar. He found her cornered by the Zenthian tinkerer and two hired brutes, each wielding electrified prods. Her hood had fallen back, revealing her red skin and the ridges along her jaw. The crowd gawped, some with curiosity, others with malicious glee. A rare Valkyr indeed, and likely worth a fortune in bounty. Keel darted forward, adrenaline surging, but then he froze. If he tried to shield her, her curse might trigger, harming him instead. Could he risk it? Your move, readers. Comment 1, if you'd face them head on. 2, if you'd try a stealthier approach. Zathari stood rigid, fists clenched at her sides. She wasn't armed, but her greatest danger was the heartbreak in her eyes. The knowledge that if Keel jumped in, he'd be the one to feel the worst of any pain. She shot him a desperate look. Go, she mouthed. Don't. Too late. The tinkerer lunged with the stun rod, aiming straight at her abdomen. Keel's body moved on sheer instinct, placing himself in the path of the blow. Electricity coursed through his torso, white-hot agony that buckled his knees. The stabilizer clattered from his jacket, rolling across the metal floor. Zathari cried out, reaching for him, and instantly the air shimmered with that red-tinged aura. The tinkerer jerked as though struck, collapsing with a grunt. The hired brutes hesitated, confusion warring with greed in their eyes. Keel's vision blurred, every nerve alight with aftershocks, but he managed to lock eyes with Zathari, panting, "Get the stabilizer." She scooped it up, cradling it protectively. The crowd pressed closer, some snapping hollow recorders, others murmuring about the bizarre phenomenon they'd just witnessed. The brutes glanced at each other. "That's the Valkyr from the bounty boards," one hissed. "She's worth more than that part." They advanced, setting their stun rods to maximum. Zathari's aura flickered, wavering under the strain of her own turmoil. If she tried to maintain that energy field, Kill would be wrecked by the recoil. But if she dropped it, she'd be at their mercy. With effort, Kill surged to his feet. "No more heroes," he muttered under his breath. This time, he drew a battered pulse pistol from beneath his shirt, a holdout weapon he'd stashed away. He leveled it at the brutes. "Back off!" His voice wavered slightly, but he hoped they didn't notice. They halted, uncertain. "You think that pop gun will save you?" the bigger one taunted. Yet neither advanced. The tension in the bazaar was thick as tar, everyone waiting to see who would make the next move. "Come on," Keel growled, gesturing for Zathari to follow. Step by step, they inched away. The brutes didn't stop them. Maybe they were waiting for reinforcements or hoped to track them to a more advantageous spot. Either way, Keel wasn't sticking around. On the edge of your seat? Comment 1 if your nerves are shot. 2 if you want more drama. With the stabilizer clutched tightly to Zathari's chest, they fled deeper into Axtora's sprawling tunnels. Twisting passageways eventually led them to a series of old mining shafts, repurposed into ramshackle living quarters. The stale air smelled of rock dust and unwashed bodies. They ducked into a cramped alcove, panting, hearts pounding. Keel slumped against a metal beam, pressing a hand to his chest where the stun rod had burned him. Zathari immediately knelt beside him, worry etched on her face. "You're hurt again," she murmured, tears threatening to spill. Her curse, her existence. Every time he protected her, he paid the price. "I'm sorry, He shook his head vehemently. "None of this is your fault." But the words felt hollow. The truth was simpler. Her biology was a weapon no one intended, least of all her. Yet it happened every time someone tried to shield her. Keel forced a wan smile. "Besides, I'm still breathing." Cradling the stabilizer, Zathari exhaled shakily. "We have what we need. Let's just get back to the tenacity and leave this place behind." Her eyes swept the dingy corridor. "I can't bear any more violence." Keel grimaced. "We'll try, but Echelon Riptide or those brutes might be combing every corridor by now." His mind raced for an alternative. Maybe they could pay off a local smuggler to ferry them out. But trusting another criminal ring hardly sounded safer. Suddenly, footsteps echoed, coming closer. They tensed, bracing for a fight. But when a slender figure appeared, an Axteron local wearing tattered clothes and a filtered breather, she lifted her hands in a gesture of peace. "I saw what happened in the bazaar," she said in a raspy whisper. "You two are in danger." Kiel and Zathari exchanged wary glances. "What's it to you?" Kiel asked. "I have a small ship," she continued. "I can get you off Axtora, but I need something in return." Her gaze flicked to Zathari, then back to Kiel. "Your abilities, particularly yours," she said, nodding at Zathari, "could help someone I care about. He's unwell. No doctor can fix him, but I suspect your curse might do something. Transfer his pain away, maybe." Zathari's lips parted in shock. "That's not how it works." The stranger shrugged. "I'm out of options. Help him and I'll help you leave. Big decision. Comment 1. If you trust this stranger. 2. If you sense a trap. Akil's mind spun. They'd come to Axtora for one reason, to secure a stabilizer and escape. Now this stranger wanted to bargain for some miraculous cure using Zathari's curse, an ability that had only ever brought misery. What if it kills him? Zathari asked, her voice taut with fear. I can't control how or when the curse rebounds pain. It's tied to someone protecting me. The Extoran woman's eyes were hollow with desperation. I understand, but we're out of time, just like you. My father is dying, and no medicine works. If there's even a chance, I have to try. If you help him, my ship is yours. I'll give you the codes, no strings attached. Silence weighed heavily between them. Zathari's gaze flicked to Kiel. He could see her reluctance. The curse was rarely beneficial, and she'd never intentionally used it to siphon someone's suffering before. But the alternative, they could be stuck here, out of allies, with Echelon Riptide closing in. Finally, she swallowed hard. Take me to him. They followed the woman, whose name, they learned, was Hannah, through a maze of passageways to a dimly lit chamber. It looked more like a hovel than a medical ward. An older man lay on a cot, gaunt and feverish. Machines beeped faintly, monitoring his failing vitals. Zathari approached tentatively. I don't know if this will work. My curse triggers when someone tries to protect me from harm. She exhaled, trembling. But maybe if I open myself to his suffering, I can redirect it? No manual existed for something like this. It was pure guesswork, guided by empathy and desperation. Kiel stood nearby, a protective hand on her shoulder. He braced himself, suspecting he'd feel any backlash. Zathari gently placed her palm over the old man's chest. She closed her eyes, focusing. At first, nothing happened. Then Kiel felt a tingle along his spine. A faint red glow emanated from Zathari's hand, pulsing in sync with the man's labored heartbeat. The man gasped, eyes fluttering open. Pain racked him, but something in that moment seemed to shift. Zathari stiffened, a soft cry escaping her lips. Kiel's breath hitched as wave after wave of agony flowed outward, and he found himself shouldering half of it. Moment of truth. Comment 1. If you believe this will heal him. 2. If you're biting your nails. Paragraph 22. Approx. 375 words. Zathari's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly with that red luminescence. She felt the man's pain as if it were her own, his fever, his tortured lungs, the ache in his bones. Instinctively, her cursed biology sought a target, a protector to rebound that suffering upon. And there was Kiel, standing beside her, bracing himself for the worst. The energy crackled, arcing between them. In that moment, Zathari felt something remarkable. Instead of simply dumping the agony onto Kiel, her bond with him allowed for a distribution of that burden. The old man groaned, his face relaxing slightly. His breathing, ragged only seconds before, grew more even. Meanwhile, Zathari sagged to her knees, the weight of his illness hammering her. Kiel reeled as well, a choking gasp rattling in his throat. The red glow around Zathari flickered, as if uncertain whether to intensify or disperse. In a final surge of will, she visualized a path, an internal channel that let the pain flow between her and Kiel without overwhelming either. She thought of all the times Kiel had shielded her, and all the guilt she felt watching him suffer on her behalf. Now she extended a mental hand to him, silently begging him to help her carry this one more time. And he answered, despite the risk, despite the scorching burn in his veins. The old man's eyes fluttered open, focusing for the first time in days. He coughed once, testing his lungs, then drew a deeper breath. Color slowly returned to his cheeks, a faint pink flush that seemed miraculous in this dim, hopeless chamber. Zathari's hand slipped away, trembling. She fell back against Kiel, both of them panting. The old man was not perfectly healed. His body still bore the ravages of disease, but he was no longer at death's door. A fragile peace settled in the room, broken only by the continuous hum of the monitoring devices. In that hush, Hannah sank to her knees beside her father, tears streaming down her face, murmuring gratitude that bordered on reverence. As the red glow subsided, a palpable shift swept the room. Hannah's father managed to sit upright, albeit slowly. His gaze swept across Zathari, Kiel, and then back to his daughter. "I can breathe," he whispered, awe and uncertainty mingling in his tone. His fever had broken, and while he still looked frail, the stark lines of agony etched into his face had softened. Zathari could hardly stand. She clung to Kiel's arm, her entire body trembling. He pressed a soothing hand to her back, feeling the echo of her exhaustion in his own bones. They were drained, but alive. Hannah blinked back tears, throwing her arms around her father. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely, her voice muffled against his shirt. Then she turned to Zathari, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "You, both of you, saved him. I'll honor my end of the bargain. The ship is yours, or I can pilot it if you prefer." Kiel exchanged a look with Zathari. For a fleeting second, he considered simply asking for the codes, parting ways, and continuing their solitary journey. But as he looked at the battered starship stabilizer they'd stolen, and then at Hannah's battered clothes and tired face, a new thought emerged. Perhaps forging alliances in this harsh galaxy was better than constant flight. "Come with us," Zathari said gently, her voice raspy from the ordeal. "If you want, we'll repair the tenacity with this stabilizer, but maybe having two ships in a convoy would be safer. Or you can pilot yours, and we'll watch each other's backs." Hannah inhaled sharply, glancing at her father. He managed a weak nod, though his eyes sparked with relief and, dare they call it, hope. "I'll do it," she agreed. A fresh start, away from Axtora, away from Echelon Riptide, away from everything. Their plan fell into place swiftly. They snuck back to the tenacity, carefully avoiding the bazaar and the brutes who might still be looking for them. Hannah's father needed time to recuperate, so he remained aboard her vessel, while she and the others installed the stabilizer in Kiel's battered craft. In the cold, cramped cargo hold, Zathari and Kiel exchanged weary smiles, each of them bearing fresh scars from the day's events, each painfully aware that bigger battles awaited them outside the relative anonymity of Axtora. Yet something had changed. In the hush of that improvised medical ward, they discovered the possibility that Zathari's curse, once purely destructive, could be harnessed to save a life. The price was high, but no higher than what she and Kiel had already paid. It hinted at a broader potential, a question neither dared speak aloud. What if her biology, paired with Kiel's empathic implant, could heal more than just one dying man? What if they were only scratching the surface of a connection that might reshape the entire galaxy's understanding of pain and compassion? For now, they settled for small victories. The stolen stabilizer slid neatly into place, and soon the tenacity purred with renewed life. Keel slid into the pilot's chair, rolling his shoulder experimentally. Though it still throbbed, he was well enough to navigate. Beside him, Zathari strapped in, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion, but shining with a quiet, determined light. They had each other, and that was more than either had dared hope for. With one final glance back at Axtora's labyrinth of corruption and second chances, Kiel engaged the thrusters. The battered starship rose smoothly this time, surging upward through the dome's atmospheric shield. Hannah followed in her own small vessel, carrying her father to an uncertain yet hopeful future. It was time to see what lay beyond the rim of this broken world. As the stars swallowed them, Kiel and Zathari shared a look of understanding. They might spend their lives running from bounty hunters, corporate despots, or twisted collectors eager to exploit Zathari's gift. But they would face it together, two souls bound by the improbable bond of shared pain and chosen love. All right, story fans, we've reached a critical turning point. Zathari's power isn't just a curse, it's evolving into something miraculous. She has just willingly taken on a dying man's pain, and Kiel felt every second of it. But here's the big question. Can they keep using this ability without destroying themselves in the process? What do you think? Should they keep pushing forward, exploring these dangerous limits, or is it too much risk for Kiel and Zathari to bear? Leave a comment right now. Type 1 if you believe their bond will grow strong enough to protect them, or type 2 if you think they're risking too much. And while you're at it, let us know where you're listening from. We love connecting with fans around the globe. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our storytelling family and make sure you never miss out on these incredible tales. All right, let's get back to Kiel and Zathari. Things are about to get intense.